Welcome to Subnetting Level 9, putting the subnetting cheat sheet to work. I want you to know that there are many different ways to learn how to subnet. The subnetting wheel is great for visual learners. As a visual learner, I was so thrilled to learn how to subnet using the subnetting wheel, or PI. It helped me master subnetting with confidence. The textbook will lead you through a mathematical process, placing more emphasis on the bits, the ones and the zeros, in the placement of the subnet mask. It's a great method for analytical learners. There are also many YouTube videos on subnetting. I have found some helpful and some very confusing. The best advice I can give is to find the way that works best for you and stick with it. Remember that learning to subnet is a process. Be patient and practice. You may seek assistance at an open lab or office hours. I am very happy to help. This video will present a variety of subnetting problems. Be sure to have your subnetting cheat sheet handy. You should not use a calculator of any kind. You are free to use a scratch piece of paper to do any calculations if needed. Here's the first problem. What is the dotted decimal subnet mask for a /24? If we take a look at the cheat sheet, you should be able to locate the /24 CIDR notation, and then to the left, find its dotted decimal subnet mask. So simply, the answer is 255.255.255.0. Remember that the /24 means that there are 24 ones in the subnet mask. So there's 8 and another 8 and another 8. That's 24 one bits. Okay, let's move on. Problem 2. What is the dotted decimal subnet mask for a /28? Once again, grab your cheat sheet, locate the /28 CIDR notation, and then look to the left and find the dotted decimal subnet mask. The answer is 255.255.255.240. Remember that the dotted decimal is equivalent to the CIDR notation /28. Just two different ways of writing the same thing. Given the network 10.32.56.0/24, what is the broadcast IP? As we look at the subnetting cheat sheet, we're going to find the /24 CIDR notation and then look to the right. It reminds us that a /24 is one class C, and we know that one class C can be represented as one wheel or one pi. The network number is .0. That's the very first IP address in the range. The last IP address in the range is the broadcast IP. So the broadcast IP is 255. The answer would be 10.32.56.255. That is the broadcast IP for the network 10.32.56.0. Problem 4. Given that same network, 10.32.56.0/24, what is the first host IP? Once again, quick glance at the cheat sheet. /24 is one class C. One class C is one pi. And I take a look, I'm starting at .0, that's my network. Remember, I'm not allowed to give the network IP address to any devices on my network. So the first host IP is going to be one more than the network. So the first host IP, remember, I can't use 0, that's the network, so I can't hands off the network IP, but I could start with .1. That's what we call the first host IP. So the answer to this question is 10.32.56.1, the first host IP. All right, we're going to take a look at problem 5, which uses the exact same network. Given the network 10.32.56.0/24, what is the last host IP? So once again, /24 is one class C. That means I'm looking at one subnetting wheel or one pi. I know that my 0, right? We've already defined this as the network IP. We've defined the .1 as the last host. I'm sorry, the first host, right? First host. And we've defined the .255 as the broadcast. So when we're looking at the last host or looking for the last host, that's one less than the broadcast. So the very last host IP would be 254. So the answer is 10.32.56.254. So remember, in a /24, I could give any device on my network an IP address from .1 through .254. Those are my host IPs. All right, let's move on. Problem 6. Given the network 172.28.4.0/26, what is the broadcast IP? Now, when we tackle these problems, always start by looking at the CIDR notation. I'm going to grab my cheat sheet and I'm going to find that /26 CIDR notation. I'm going to look to the right and I'm going to get reminded that a /26 is really like a quarter or a fourth of a class C, and that it has 64 total IP addresses in the range. If you recall, cutting that /24 into 4 subnets, 4/26 subnets, looks something like this. So our network address that we've been given is .0. So .0 is where we are starting. So the broadcast IP is going to be the last IP address in the range. That's .63 right here. So the address or the answer to this problem is 172.28.4.63. Problem 7. Given the network 172.28.4.0/26, list the network IP, the first host IP, the last host IP, and the broadcast IP. Once again, cheat sheet reminds us that a /26 has 64 total IP addresses and that it can be represented by a quarter or a fourth of a class C. So we're going to grab our visual of our subnetting wheel here. Remember that we're talking about, we're given the .0 as our starting point. So this is the quadrant that we're talking about. So this is the area here that we need to find. So we've already defined the 0 as my network, and .63 is my broadcast. So the first host, right, is one more than the network. So the first host is going to be .1. 0 plus 1 is 1. So the next number is .1. That's my first host. My last host is going to be one less than the broadcast. So my last host is going to be .62. All right, so my answers would be the network IP is .0, the first host is .1, the last host is .62, and the broadcast is .63. It's important to know the starting number and the ending number of your IP address ranges. As a network administrator, you are not going to want to apply or assign an invalid IP address that's out of range of that subnet. So remember, we can't use the network, we cannot use the broadcast, we can use everything else in between. All right, problem 8. Given the network 192.168.28.128/26, list the network IP, the first host IP, the last host IP, and the broadcast IP. So Once again, /26, 64 total IPs. That can be represented as a fourth or a quarter of a Class C. So we take a look at that picture of our subnetting wheel, and here's the thing that we have to watch for. So we've already defined the size of the network by the CIDR notation, but then always pay attention to our starting point. So our network is 128. That means we're talking about this quadrant right here. So that's our starting and our stopping point. Everything, all of the IP addresses in this quadrant. So my network is going to be 128. My broadcast is going to be 191. And the numbers between then would be 129 and 190. So there again, my network IP is 128. My first host is .129. That's the first IP address I could give to a device. The last IP address I could give would be .90, and then my broadcast is 191. Problem 9. Given the network 10.10.10.32/27, list the network IP, the first host IP, the last host IP, and the broadcast IP. So now a /27, when we look at our cheat sheet, we see that a /27 has a total of 32 IP addresses and could be represented by 8 different slices in that pie, or 1/8 of the Class C. It might look something like this. So I'm going to be looking at the network .32. That is my starting point. So I'm going to be focusing on this subnetting range of IP addresses. So to find the network, that's pretty easy because this was given to me, right? So 32, that's my network. If I'm going to find, I know that a /27 has 32 IP addresses. So I'm going to see that .32 through 63 gives me 32 IP addresses. I could always double check my work because I could start at the 32. I'm going to add the 32 IP addresses that are in that range, and that will result in the next IP address or the next network IP address, which is the 64. So I know that I'm on the right track because 64 would be my next starting point for the following subnet. So 63 has to be my broadcast. So 32 to 63 is my broadcast. And then from there, once I find my first IP, which is the network, and the very last IP, which is the broadcast, then I can find my first host and my last host. So the first host would have to be 33, and the last host would have to be 62. So once again, network is 32, first host 33, last host 62, broadcast 63. Remember, a /27 only has a total of 32 IP addresses and 30 host IP addresses after we would subtract the network and the broadcast IP. All right, moving on. Problem number 10. Given the network 10.10.96/27, list the network IP and the first host IP, the last host IP, and the broadcast IP. So once again, we see we're going to start /27. Check out my subnetting cheat sheet, get reminded, /27, 32 total IP addresses can be represented as one of the 8 slices in that subnetting pie. And where I'm going to be starting is not at 0, but I'm going to be starting at 96. So I take a look at this subnetting pie. I find where 96 is going to start. I see that 96 and 32 would take me to my next subnet, 28. So that would be out of range. So my broadcast is going to be .127. So my broadcast is going to be 127. And then my first and last host would be a 97 here and 126 right there. So once again, the network IP is 10.10.96. That was given to us, right? So that was already given to us. That's where we're starting. The first host is always one more, so that's 97. I add one to it. The Sometimes I like to find the broadcast first, so I find that broadcast where it is. I can add 32 to 96 and find my next starting point, and then back that off one here. So I've got 127 as my broadcast, and then I subtract one from my broadcast to get my last host. Given the network 192.168.44.0/27, what's the first host IP? Now, when we see a problem like this, we want to think a couple of different things. So one, I look at the 27/27 CIDR notation. So I know I'm talking about a range of IP addresses where I only have 32 numbers in there. One's going to be the network, one's going to be the broadcast. And then I'm going to see, okay, what is it that I'm looking for? Am I looking for the network number, which I've been given right here? Am I looking for the broadcast? No. I'm looking for the first host. So that's the first host IP that that's the answer to the question is what is the first host IP. So as I take a look, once again, /27, yep, 32 total IPs. It's going to be a kind of one of the 8 slices of the pie, and I'm seeing it's going to be the very first one because I was given the .0 as a starting point. So I take a look at my subnetting wheel here, and it's pretty simple. You might not even need to go through all of that because the first host is always one more than the network. So if you're given the network, it's going to be .1. So even without even looking at everything, if I would have saw, oh, that's my network and I need to know the first host, just add 1 to this number right here and you are good to go. So the answer is 192.168.44.1, the first host IP. All right, problem 12. Given the network 192.168.7.0/28, what's the last host IP? So /28, let's find that on the cheat sheet. I see that a /28 has 16 total IP addresses, and it would be taking that subnetting wheel and dividing it into 16 different slices. So what I do is I find my starting point. So my starting point is going to be 192.168.7.0. I know that /28 has 16 total IPs. So I start with the network address, which is .0. I add 16, and this finds my next network IP. So that's into the next subnet. That's where my next subnet would start. So if I want to find my broadcast, then all I need to do is subtract 1 from this number here. So 16 minus 1 is going to give me .15. So that gives me the broadcast of my network 192.168.7.0. So basically, now that I have my broadcast, I could just subtract 1 from my broadcast, and then that identifies my last host. So my last host would actually be 14 or .14. So we could take a look at, let's just clear all that ink here. We could take a look at the subnetting wheel if we needed to. So the subnetting wheel, here's my starting point, right? There's my starting point, .0. Here's my broadcast, .15. And that means if my broadcast, right, if my broadcast is .15, my last host would be 1 less, which would be .14. So my answer is 192.168.7.14. Problem 13. Given the network 192.168.7.144/28, list the network IP, the first host IP, the last host IP, and the broadcast IP. So when we take a look at that /28, I am reminded by my subnetting cheat sheet that a /28 has 16 total IP addresses. And I know that now this time I am starting at not .0, but .144. So I take a look at my problem here. I see that I'm going to start with the network address 144. I'm going to add those 16 total IP addresses that I need. That's going to get me .160, which is the network number of my last or the network number of the next subnet. So I subtract 1 from the 160, and that gives me my broadcast IP address for my network 192.168.7.44, which would be 192.168.7.159. So 159 is the broadcast address. All right, so let's take a peek at this again. Using the subnetting wheel. So I started the wheel here so I can see there's my network. 144 is where we started. We added 32. When we added 32, I got the next network IP for the next subnet. So then I subtracted 1, and when I subtracted 1, that gave us our broadcast IP address of 159. So from 144 to 159, that is our 16 IP addresses, which means one greater than the network would be 145. That's going to be my first host. And one less than 159 is 158, which is going to be my last host. So 145, my first host, 158, my last host. So let's see how we did. So the answer here, 192.168.7.44, that's my network IP. That was given to us, so I didn't have to do anything there. I just had to add 1 to the network. There's my first host. I had to figure out where my broadcast would be, the end of this those 16 IP addresses. So the last one would be 159, and then I subtracted 1 from my 159 to find my last host of .158. So that would be that range for the network 192.168.7.144 /28. All right, problem 14. Given the network 10.2.2.0/29, list the network IP, the first host IP, the last host IP, and the broadcast IP. So bringing up our subnetting cheat sheet, I now see that /29 is only 8 IPs, 8 total IPs, right? When we subtract the broadcast and the network IP, it's only going to leave us 6 host IPs for that network that we can use within that one network. So I also see that /29 would be taking that whole pie and slicing it up into 32 small slices. So let's kind of see what we can do here. So we'll start with the network address 10.2.2.0. We're going to add 8 to that, which is going to find my next network. So that's my next network IP address. I subtract 1 from that 8, and that gives me my broadcast of .7. So my answers then are going to be 10.2.2.0, that's my network IP, right? That's where we started. That was given to us. We just add 1 to it. There's my first host. We calculated that my broadcast would be 7, and that the last host is just 1 less than that. So that's 7, last host is 6. Now, one thing that happens frequently when students are learning to subnet is they think that that broadcast should be 10.2.2.8. They want that to be the broadcast. Remember that a /29 has 8 total IP addresses. So when you start counting with 0, right, 0 through .7 is 8 digits. So that's 8 IP addresses. Because we're not starting with 1, we're starting with 0. That actually is the range of IP addresses. .0 through .7 is 8 IP addresses. Okay, so this is not the broadcast. This .8 is the next network. That's where the next subnet would start if we needed that. All right, problem 15. Sorry about that floating oval there. All right, problem 15. Given the network 172.17.0.0/30, list the network IP, the first host IP, the last host IP, and the broadcast IP. So /30, I love working with /30. So there's only 4 total IP addresses. And to tell you the truth, I count on my fingers. I count on my 4 fingers when I calculate these. It makes it pretty easy if I can just tap, 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 tap my fingers on the table. Makes it real easy to not lose kind of my place. So here I go. Given the network 172.17.0.0/30, list the network IP, the first host, the last host, and the broadcast IP. So there you go. There's 1, 2, 3, 4. There's the 4 IPs that we have to account for. And we're going to start with .0 because that's our starting point. So we basically find the answer by starting with the network. So the network IP is right there. That's given to us. Okay, add 1. There's the first one. Add the next one. There's the last host and the 4th IP. So 1, 2, 3, 4. 4 IP addresses that we're keeping track of here. So .0 is the network, .3 is the broadcast. Remember, you're not allowed to use the network or the broadcast, so you only have 2 host IPs. In the last video, we talked about how that was a perfect perfect fit for 2 routers. So a connection between 2 routers would be great for a /30 network between those two, that point-to-point network. All right, what happens if we look at this? Given the network 172.17.0.252, so if 252 is our starting point and it's a /30, /30 of course means 4 IP addresses, then I basically have to say, all right, 172.17.0.252 is my starting point. That's going to be my network. Can't use that one. Add one more, 253, 254, 255. I'm just counting sequentially. 255 becomes my broadcast, and these are my host IPs. So I only have 2 usable host IPs in that entire network. So in this case, one router would get 172.17.0.253, and the other side, the other router would get 172.17.0.254. All right, congratulations. You have completed level 9. Remember, practice makes perfect.